10 to 15 construction workers, all possessed by different, terrifying spirits, at the very same time. If that sounds like something out of a movie, I promise you it isn't. This is a real incident, shared with us by a man I'll call Alex. Alex isn't from the United States originally, but this happened to his family a few years back, in a rural area he's asked us not to name. I can't tell you the place, he asked that it stay private, and honestly, after what you're about to hear, you'll understand why. Stories like this always seem to teach the same lesson: some places are better left alone. If you disturb them, especially without knowing their history, they can turn on you. Not just on you, but on everyone around you. And this story is a perfect, chilling example of exactly that. Let's get into it. The incident happened a little over a decade ago. Alex told us that around that time, his father, we'll call him Daniel, was looking to invest in a new piece of land. Daniel already ran a fairly successful business, and he wanted to expand. After looking at property after property, one plot caught his eye. It sat right in the middle of a forest, remote, quiet, no neighbors, no distractions. Exactly what he wanted. Time passed. The paperwork went through without a hitch. Daniel met the seller, signed the agreement, and finally bought the land. The whole family was thrilled, a new business was on the horizon, and everyone was in good spirits. They had no idea what was buried there. Literally. The purchase itself went unusually smoothly, no complications, no delays. After the standard government formalities were finished, Daniel's plan came together. He wanted to build a small cement factory. Nothing massive, just solid, at his own scale. Before construction began, he had the land blessed in a small ceremony, then went looking for a contractor, someone with plenty of manpower so the work could move fast. After meeting several contractors, he found one who ran a large crew, sometimes over 100 men who could be split across jobs. Daniel liked that; it meant the work wouldn't stall. He hired him, and construction began. Alex often traveled to the site with his father, after school, on weekends, whenever he was free. Daniel would sometimes visit alone during school hours too. For a while, everything felt completely normal. Land clearing, leveling, prep work, the ordinary rhythm of a new build. A few days in, Daniel showed up to the site and immediately noticed something was off. Half the workforce was missing. Furious, he confronted the contractor. After all, the entire reason he'd hired this particular crew was for their numbers. He wanted the work finished quickly, and now half the men weren't even there. What the contractor told him next was hard to believe. He said that nearly half of the workers who'd shown up were sick. Not just one or two, many of them, all with different complaints, all falling ill around the same time construction started. Daniel didn't buy it at first. He figured the contractor was making excuses. Still, without much choice, he gave a stern warning: tomorrow, bring the full crew, no excuses. The factory needed to move forward. That night, dinner happened as usual. Everyone went to bed. Nothing seemed wrong. The next morning, worried the contractor might again show up short-handed, Daniel decided to get to the site early enough to catch the problem and call in replacements if needed. When he arrived, he found the crew there. But it was an entirely different group of people. Almost none of the original workers were present. This time, instead of yelling, Daniel simply asked the contractor, "Where did the first crew go?" The answer he got was even harder to swallow. The contractor explained that most of the workers from the day before had also fallen ill overnight. Daniel wanted to dismiss it as nonsense, but this time, something stopped him. If the contractor were lying, why bother swapping out the entire crew? He could have just sent the same tired excuse and the same men. Instead, he'd brought fresh workers, in the same numbers. It didn't add up unless it was true. Daniel decided to stay on site the whole day this time, to watch, to help however he could. At one point, near the gate, he noticed some scattered debris. Being the type who couldn't just walk past a mess, he started cleaning it up himself, setting aside anything valuable, burning the rest. By evening, the workers had left. Daniel shut the wooden gate, the one meant to keep animals and wandering strangers out, and headed home. That's when things started happening to him too. Alex says his father's condition turned strange almost immediately. He felt physically unwell, a deep, unfamiliar ache in his body, and an overwhelming, baseless fear crept over him. Nothing around him had changed. The house was calm, familiar, even unusually peaceful. And yet, dread sat heavy in his chest, like something unseen was standing just behind him. As the night wore on, he got weaker. Not sick enough for a hospital, but drained, the kind of exhaustion that makes getting out of bed feel impossible. The fear never let up either. And that's when it clicked for him. This was exactly what the workers had described. The same fatigue. The same unexplainable dread. He'd only spent one full day at that site, and already his body was reacting the same way theirs had. Something wasn't right. This wasn't an ordinary flu. It felt like something else entirely. The next morning, Daniel called the contractor and asked for the head mason's number. The man had also failed to show up, also reportedly sick. Daniel called him directly and asked what exactly he'd felt. The mason's answer stunned him. Word for word, it matched what Daniel himself had experienced. The same dread. The same weakness. The same reluctance to even move. Now Daniel was certain, this wasn't a coincidence, and it wasn't the contractor lying to cover for absent workers. Something about that land itself was making people sick. And it wasn't natural. Nobody had eaten or touched anything in common that could explain it. Something about the property itself was the problem. Daniel's first thought was that the blessing ceremony hadn't been done properly, and that was somehow the cause. He called the priest who'd performed it and explained everything, what had happened to the workers, and now to himself. The priest was confident nothing had gone wrong on his end. Plenty of people skip these ceremonies entirely and their projects go fine, he said. Yours had barely even started, and the ritual was done correctly. There was no fault there. That left Daniel with more questions than answers. Why was everyone getting sick? Why did everyone feel the same crushing fear? He couldn't shake the feeling that something else was going on, something he couldn't control just by thinking about it. So he turned to someone else, a man locally known for practicing occult rituals, someone people believed could handle spirits, black magic, that sort of thing. Daniel brought him to the site. The man performed his own rituals, walked the grounds, and declared the land cleansed. He assured Daniel nothing like this would happen again. Workers went back to the site. Work resumed. The man took his payment and left, confident the problem was solved. It wasn't. Within 2 or 3 days, the same pattern returned. Workers started falling sick again, calling out, avoiding the site. This time, Daniel didn't even bother arguing with the contractor. He trusted by now that the man wasn't lying. Something about that land was genuinely wrong, and no amount of yelling was going to fix it. Around this time, the contractor told Daniel something even more unsettling. His crew was starting to refuse the job outright. He said his workers didn't want to keep working there at all. Daniel asked why. The answer chilled him. At night, some of the workers were becoming, in the contractor's words, possessed. They said it felt as if something else was controlling their bodies. Grown men would start acting like women. Others behaved like frightened children. Some would act like frail old people, mimicking movements and voices that weren't their own. No one could explain it, but everyone felt the same unease, that whatever was happening to their bodies and their families needed to be dealt with, and soon. But there was one more detail that made it even stranger. Daniel noticed that when these workers were possessed and talking, they'd slip into a language none of them normally spoke, a language associated with a religious and cultural background completely different from their own. None of the workers were from that background. They didn't know that language. They'd never used it in their lives. So where was it coming from? At that point, Daniel realized no local healer or occult practitioner was going to fix this. They'd just been taking his money. He needed to find out the truth himself. He took Alex with him and went around to the families who'd lived in the surrounding area for generations, asking if there was any history tied to that land, any old rituals, any past events that might explain what was happening. Most people had no idea what he was talking about. The story had simply faded from memory over the decades. But then he found one elderly resident who remembered clearly, because he'd lived through it himself. Decades earlier, back in the 1970s or 80s, that land had been a burial ground. A large number of bodies had been laid to rest there. But afterward, the area fell out of use. Many people who'd lived near it either died or moved away to the cities, and eventually, no one was left to tend to it. The land grew wild, overtaken by brush, and people simply stopped burying there, and stopped visiting altogether. By the time Daniel bought it, decades later, almost nobody remembered its history. Even the man who'd sold Daniel the land, the previous owner, had no idea. He'd only owned it a short while himself, and had no clue about its past either. It didn't take long for the pieces to come together. That patch of forest had once held the graves of many people. And when construction crews came in, digging, leveling, disturbing the ground, they may have disturbed something that had been resting undisturbed for decades. There's an old belief that when the dead are disturbed, they don't stay quiet. They make their presence known to the living. And maybe that explained the different personalities, the different voices, the different behaviors during those episodes, different spirits, all reacting to the same disruption, taking hold of different people at once. Once Daniel understood what was really going on, he made his decision immediately: construction would stop. For good. His only remaining worry was for the workers who'd already been affected. Would they be okay? Would things go back to normal for them? Not long after, he got the answer he'd been hoping for. The original workers, the ones affected earliest and worst, were recovering on their own. Once they stopped going to the site, whatever had been affecting them slowly faded. It was as clear a sign as anyone could ask for: leave the land alone, and it leaves you alone. Daniel went back to the previous owner and told him everything: the burial ground, the sickness, all of it. The man was just as stunned. He'd bought the land after 2000, sold it without knowing any of its history, and had never experienced anything strange himself, since he'd never really used it. Daniel accepted the loss. Better that, he figured, than to keep pushing forward and risk more harm. He shut the project down completely and never touched the land again. Slowly, everyone who'd been affected, even lightly, recovered. Daniel himself had already started feeling better days before he even understood what was happening. Alex told us that after everything, one lesson stuck with his whole family: don't disturb the dead. Leave them be, because if you don't, they may find a way to make sure you regret it. That was the sign they got, loud and clear. And to this day, that patch of land sits untouched, exactly as it was left. Stories like this are a reminder that some places carry histories we can't see on the surface, and some ground is better left undisturbed. You never know what's waiting beneath it, or what it might do if you wake it up.